Howdy, and welcome to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Nord, where we cover a mix of current events, politics, and the law. Take it away, Warren.
Welcome back, where this is, I'm told, episode 31 of White Hat Law. This is the pregame midterm election, get out the vote, and let's talk about elections episode. And so today with me, I've got Dr. Grant Ferguson. I'm going to give the entire title. Instructor and Director of Outreach and Public Service Internships and Political Science at TCU. So we always want to give homage to the local school here.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Dr. Ferguson, thank you for joining us today. Today, I think we're going to talk about the importance of early voting. People say midterm. I think I know what midterm means. I'm going to ask a lot of questions that I may or may not know the answer to, and I'm not going to tell you which ones I know the answers to.
Okay.
Because that way I have plausible deniability. What are midterms? Why do we call them midterms?
We call them midterms because they take place midway between the president's first or second term of office. So just like we have presidential elections every 4 years we have midterm elections. Those midterm elections
like the Summer Olympics.
Yes, like a Summer Olympics.
Or no, it's like the Winter Olympics, right? It's every other.
Well, you can tell I'm more excited about politics than Winter Olympics.
I don't know anything about most sports, but I understand. So it's between the presidential ones.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's also World Cup years for people who follow soccer.
Oh, you got me lying now. I don't know. We'll have to correct that in the after show. You'll be able to go to our website at no, we don't have one. How much bigger is a midterm turnout than a presidential?
You mean how much smaller?
Yeah, how much smaller?
So on average, roughly the last, we'll say, maybe 18 years, turnout in presidential elections is approximately 3 out of 5 eligible voters. It's a little smaller in some years, so that would be 2000, 2012, a little higher in some years, 2004, 2008, 2016, roughly. In kind of midterm election years, you're talking about 35 to 40% of eligible voters nationally turn out, and often lower than 30% in Texas.
So it's about half?
It would be, it'd be about 2/3.
About 2/3. So it drops by a third, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And of course, the obvious reason for that is you don't have a president at the top. Mm-hmm. I've always thought it was funny when people say, I am a great voter. And because I'm a precinct chair, and we look these things up. So every once in a while you get into these little searches to see who's voted, who's not voted. And they'll say, I'm a great voter, and you look at them, they vote on presidential years only. They've never voted for city council. They've never voted for in the midterm. And they think that they are great voters. That's their self-described position. And the other thing that's always funny is that that's the election they have the least impact on, right? And it's the very least. You vote for dog catcher for city council in May, and you're voting for like 20 people. But president is different. Why is it important to vote in midterms?
It's important to vote in midterms precisely because of the reason you just stated, because your vote counts more. It's simple math. If you are far less likely to be the one person who's decisive of the one state that changes the Electoral College from one party's candidate to the others, you are far more likely to be decisive in a local, state, or state race, or even a U.S. House or Senate race that is happening in a midterm election. For example, there are a number of local and state elections that are decided by just a few hundred votes. So your odds of being decisive might be something like 1 in 200. That's a lot different than, at best, being maybe one of the 500, almost 600 voters in Florida that decided the 2000 election.
Right.
And something like that in 2016 in several states. A couple examples. Rodney Anderson in Texas House District 105, his last re-election race was decided in 2016, was decided by just a couple hundred votes, or less, if I remember correctly.
Great representative up for re-election right now. I know you can't say that, or I don't know how you feel about that, but Rodney's a great guy. I noticed that whenever people vote when people are doing mailers for elections, I know that we do things like, we'll say we're going to mail to the 2 of 3 R's, right? And so we're looking at the people who vote in the midterms, or the two of the last three Republican primaries. Mm-hmm. That's how we that's how we gauge how good of a voter somebody is, or good of a Republican, or vice versa. Anything like that. How involved they are. So if you want to get the good mail, you need to vote in the primaries.
High glossy photographs, interesting ads about who paid their taxes. It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. Who's been lying to the voters?
Yeah.
It turns out everybody's been lying to the voters. They all suck. And so that's not quite true, but it is fun to say. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to play fast and loose with the facts. No, we're going to do a rapid fire, frequently asked questions on voting. And so just so people who don't know how to vote or voted very rarely know what to do. So if I don't know if I'm registered, how do I confirm my status?
You can go to your favorite search engine and Google Tarrant County voter lookup, or DuckDuckGo if you prefer that one that doesn't track you.
Absolutely, we do.
Then you can do that, and it will come up with a really nice map and a place to put in your first and last name, and you can find out how many Grant Fergusons there are voting in Tarrant County, for example.
Yes, you can.
And find your name, and it will let you know if you're registered.
And if you don't get it right, you probably have the first name and the last name backwards.
True.
So.
Sometimes I forget and tell people my first name is Ferguson.
So, yes, that's a good plan. If you use it on the phone, sometimes it's kind of kludgy because the app doesn't work real well. But go to your actual desktop if you can have one. All right, I'm registered to vote, but I moved this past year. Is there anything I need to do to make sure I won't have a problem voting in November?
So if you moved within the same precinct and area, you have no problem. You should have re-registered if you moved across districts and states. Or excuse me, not districts and states, but districts to vote. Otherwise, you were still considering registered at your previous address.
So if I moved 2 weeks ago, I go back to my old precinct?
If you still haven't changed your residence, yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, and I don't remember seeing my certificate lately. Is that a problem? Don't I just stay registered?
So you do, provided you have voted in the last 2 to 4 years. It is not a problem. You do not need to bring that to vote with you, provided that you have an alternative form of photo ID.
Alternative form photo ID. What's that, like water bill?
So if you have none of the following, if you have no concealed carry license, driver's license, U.S. passport, military ID, you could provide an alternative form of ID like a water bill, I believe a pay stub, a few other things, along with a signed declaration of, gosh, if I can get this right, reasonable hardship, and your vote will still count.
Don't do any of that, though. Bring your freaking driver's license. You know, how hard is it, right? So, okay. What does substantially similar mean, and why do we care about that?
Because sometimes people misspell your name. So, for example, Waron might be registered, but that is not how you spell your name. And if that's the case and everything else is correct, the registrar will look and say, oh, this was probably a mistake, and you will be able to vote provided you can sort of verify that, that everything is all right. So, for example, sometimes bureaucratic snafus happen. Bureaucracy makes mistakes.
Right.
And don't worry, in the event that your name is slightly misspelled, it's not going to be a problem.
Well, it's substantially similar. So don't come in and say your name is Warren.
No.
You know.
No.
Okay. My registration status is suspense. What does that mean?
It means that you have not responded to requests to verify your registration status, and you haven't done so in the past 2 years. If indeed you are still at that address and just for whatever reason have not responded nor voted, you can still come and vote, provided you fill out paperwork showing that you are still at that address and eligible to be registered.
Okay. Can anybody vote early by mail, or it also referred to as absentee voting? Or do you have to
in the
kind of
state of
special
Texas,
thing?
no. You need to fall into one of a few categories. You need to be 65 plus. You need to be provably very sick or disabled. You need to prove you were going to be out of town for all of early voting and election day. And I believe there's one other category. Or in jail but otherwise eligible to vote. And in that event, you can register to vote absentee.
So if you're in jail, then you may check with your
parole officer?
Yeah, not parole officer. You're in jail.
Oh, yeah.
Check with something.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll take care of that.
Your attorney. Maybe your attorney.
Your attorney
Yeah.
could probably take care of that. Pay your attorney. What kind of identification is required to qualify to vote in person?
So the kinds of identification that you need to vote in person, concealed carry license, driver's license, passport, military ID. If you don't have any of those, as I mentioned earlier, it's pay stub, water bill, rent bill, a couple other kinds of bills, and a signed declaration listing, that it was a hardship for you to bring one of those.
So an expired photo ID will probably be okay.
It will be okay, but only if it's less than 4 years expired and you were under 70. However, if you were over 70 years of age, you're in good shape because that expired ID from, I guess, 1996, still good to go.
There you go. I was wondering about that because that's important to me. What if I bring, okay, so if I don't bring any photo ID with me when I vote, will I be turned away?
No, provided that you can you can fill out a form and you can cast a provisional ballot, which you can later validate by visiting your county voter registrar with the proper forms of ID and some sort of declaration saying why you could not make it.
Wow. The only people that will do that will be people who moved here and became a citizen like yesterday, because the average American will say, "It's so much work." But the idea is you can show up and you can usually vote. So
your vote will still count if you became a citizen yesterday.
Yes. Okay. How can I obtain a DPS election identification certificate? What is that?
That's a great question. That is something that can be provided to people who, for various reasons, are unable to provide any sort of the normal forms of photo identification. If you have one of those normal forms of photo identification, you are not eligible to receive that. If you do not, you can fill it out and do so, I believe, at your Tarrant County voter registration office. I believe that's correct. Or look it up online. I believe there's it will give you directions on how to do it.
Okay. There was another question that was important that I saw here. Oh, what if I want to undervote? What is undervoting?
Undervoting is something that many voters do. It's the practice of voting just at the very top of the ballot, right? So in a presidential election year, it's voting for president and then not casting a vote for any of the offices below. However, I would encourage you to actually pay attention to all those offices because as it turns out, U.S. Senate, U.S. House, Governor, Ag Commissioner, Land Commissioner, City Council, all of them are important and affect you in ways that you might not think. That's undervoting, and I would encourage you not to do it, even though many Americans do.
Okay. I think we'll take a break now, and we'll come back. We're going to be talking about this specific election, midterm election, and we'll get some details on that, and then we'll, before we end. So come back in just a minute. We'll be there.
Hang on, y'all. More with Warren when we get back. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to the White Hat Law Show with Warren Norris. Take it away, Warren.
Welcome back. We're talking to Dr. Grant Ferguson, who about all things midterms. And Dr. Ferguson is a professor of TCU, a fine institution. So go
Well,
Frogs.
thank you, Warren.
Sure. I'm a generous soul, but boomer. So anyway, sorry, I couldn't help it. I'm a victim. End of straight ticket voting. Tell me about that. What's going on there?
So basically, Texas voters have the option when they get to go vote of just checking Republican and Democrat or Libertarian as well for all, and it will fill out the ballot for all of those offices. Okay, so you're checking every single Republican or every single Democrat on that ballot. The legislature voted in 2017, and Governor Abbott signed a bill ending straight ticket voting starting in the 2020 election season. So this is the last time that you will be able to vote for your state legislators via straight ticket voting. There are different takes on the issue. Some people really like the idea of being able to save time on a busy election day by just going in and checking all the D's or all the R's. If you are a very strong Democrat, strong Republican, you might like it. On the other hand, what you're effectively doing is saying, I don't really care anything about these candidates. All I care about is their party.
I disagree. That is not at all what you're saying. What you're saying is I've done this analysis enough times to know that the Democrat versus the Republican every single time, with very few exceptions, is going to be the Republican or the Democrat, whatever the case may be, is going to have my values more often than the other one. And so it doesn't mean I don't care. It's just an efficient way. It's the engineer's approach, right? It's just do it all at once.
Oh, it's efficient, and I'm not saying I don't do it. All I'm saying is that you don't get the knowledge, which actually really does help, of going through and reading and knowing who your elected officials are by saying, oh, Kay Granger, Republican, yes, or Mark Vesey, Democrat, yes. You don't get the sort of knowledge practice of doing that, which can really help. And actually, it also kind of helps incumbents, but maybe you don't want incumbents
Dr.
getting
Ferguson, can't you go through and list all of these people? You don't have to read them.
I'm not going to go through and list every single Republican and Democrat
I can do
on
it.
the ballot.
I can do it. Maybe. That's okay.
But I'm going to learn from participating in this election.
There you go. We're all going to learn in the next 2 years.
Yeah.
You at least read it one time. But what does it mean to undervote?
Undervoting is the practice of voting for the candidate at the top of the ballot, or maybe several of the offices at the top: U.S. Senate, Governor, Land Commissioner, etc., U.S. House Representative, and then not voting for the offices that are further down the ballot, lower level, city level, state house, things like that.
Just run out of patience. I got things to do. Who cares about these judges? Yeah.
You know,
that's one of those things where people talk about the straight ticket voting is what is it going to have? Where's it going to have most impact? Are people going to be more likely to go all the way down and vote for all these judges that we don't know, right? And what party comprises the people who are going to go all the way down and vote, as you might say, blindly for people they don't know based on their tribal affiliation?
Yeah, you can look at it that way.
It's an open question. We're going to find out, though, in 2020.
2020.
Yeah, so the question has come up to me twice, and one of these answers I know. I'm not sure about the other one. I think I do. Let's say I want to vote straight ticket Republican, but there's one guy I want to send a message to, and I don't want to vote for him. What do I do? Can I vote straight ticket?
So you can. My understanding is, I haven't voted yet, so I haven't seen our new software, but my understanding is if you check straight ticket, it will then prompt you before you declare that you are ready to be done by showing you all the candidates you voted for, and you could uncheck, for example, one of the Republicans or one of the Democrats and vote for a third-party candidate or the other party's candidate in a race to express perhaps particular displeasure with the party that perhaps otherwise you generally support very strongly.
Dr. Ferguson is referring to George P., who has irritated a large number of Republicans with his re-envisioning of the Alamo. And I express no opinion on that race, but the way you do it, that means, is when you vote straight ticket, you're establishing a default answer to all of the questions of who are you voting for. So you don't just hit that button and then you're done. It comes back and says, do you want to do this? And then you can select that, and you could select something else if you wanted to. I'm not recommending that, but the simple point is that you can do that. So it's not until it says you're about ready to vote, and it's real big, you won't miss it. And until then, you're not actually voting. You're just messing around, choosing what you're going to do. So you have a chance to confirm all these things before you actually vote. Good. Fraud has been a big deal. I've been told by the lamestream media that there's no such thing as voter fraud anywhere in the world. What do you think?
Voter fraud does occur. It's not always decisive. Certainly it's not in presidential elections. But as you go further down the ballot, it does have the potential to affect outcomes. One example is here in Tarrant County. There were some people affiliated with organizations affiliated with the Democratic Party that mailed voter registration forms to voters blindly after having already checked U.S. citizen over 18. And that is something that theoretically could cause some confusion and take advantage of someone who, wanting to do the right thing, was uncertain whether they were eligible to vote. And that is not something that necessarily the Democratic Party or the Republican Party typically does.
Right. What I've noticed is that there are certain demographic groups that have a tendency to have kind of a very top-down structure. I mean, Tammany Hall is not too far from the description where they're really pretty much controlling swaths of voters in an area. And we had 4 people indicted or go to jail. I'm not sure what the story, where they are in this process, but here in Tarrant County. And we want to give full credit to Aaron Harris and Direct Action Texas for their assistance in making that happen and bring it to the attention of the authorities. Then you'll hear that as vote harvesting and mail-in ballot fraud, lots of things like that. Then we have the proposals that we're going to have this time. You're familiar with, I guess, some of those?
Yes. Here in Tarrant County, before the voters is a proposal for the city to spend the county to spend $800 million to renovate various mental health facilities and hospitals with respect to sort of our growing population.
And you'll find that general ballot in November often has opportunities to give authorities the authority to place debt on the public. So $800 million is not necessarily all going to flow out of the county at once. Those bonds are not going to be sold immediately, but it does give the authority to do that. And you'll find other of them. I think that Fort Worth doesn't have one, but I could be wrong. I know in Arlington we have several that are out there, and we have bond proposals, public debt, and then we have term limits. And full disclosure, I have come out strongly in favor of the term limit proposal, which you can read all about on my Facebook page. But there are two sides to that, and we may learn what we want to do or what don't want to do. We'll see how that goes.
Municipal public debt is a really big issue, and it's not something that you'll hear much about from Republicans and Democratic politicians, but it's something that really is something serious that could have some real negative consequences one way or the other. On the other hand, it is pretty important to treat those who have mental health challenges, and so just generally speaking, I think both Warren and I think you should take a look at what's on your ballot and make an informed
decision. Absolutely. Last words, Dr. Grant. Tell me, Dr. Ferguson.
I go by Dr. Grant.
I bet you get a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
So that's General Grant. That's even better, right?
It is.
So
it is.
Why does it matter if we vote? It's your last words. Tell us why we should vote.
Last words. Here's why you should vote. You can be decisive in a lot of local elections. Elections decided by less than a few hundred votes are common. If you're in doubt, you should ask a friend who cares about politics why it's important to vote. It's important to give feedback to the government. It's important to know and give feedback to your city, state, and local officials. And our country is very lucky and very blessed in the sense that we have the right to vote. You can go vote safely and securely here in this country and generally not really worry too much about the consequences no matter who you vote for. That is not the case in many other countries around the world today, even those that are democracies or democratic republics like we have.
Absolutely.
One little quick story.
Oh, sure.
I texted a friend in Colombia, which is a democratic country, that I was going to go vote in a primary election a few months ago, and she texted me back, "Be careful." And I thought, what? Why? I'm going to vote. It's going to be a bunch of people who really like politics just hanging out, and there'll be a line, and I'll be done in 20 minutes. Because in other countries, they have to call it the military to protect voters because people are not often safe to vote. That is a right that our Americans have fought and died for, and I encourage you to exercise the right that is so precious to our country.
Absolutely. The rule of law is as much as bad as we think we have it here, we're still light years ahead of other people that don't have the rule of law, where elections are times when the ruling establishment says everybody's voting for me, right? And everybody says, yeah, because I don't want to die or disappear. So it's important. I did want, I like, we said his last words, and here we are. The idea of trusting friends. I've had people I know say, well, I don't want anybody else to tell me how to vote, so I'm not going to vote. And I said, well, whenever you want to find a new dentist, you ask your friends who's a good dentist, and they tell you, and you trust them, right? Or a new mechanic, or whether a movie is good or not. You'll trust them for these small things, but you don't say, well, I don't trust them to give me a good dentist, so I'm not going to get a dentist. No, you're still going to go do that. So you have some obligations as being, it's one of those good obligations you have for being in this country. Yeah. It's really not that hard. It's not that much of a penalty to pay to be in a country where you participate. And it's okay to contact a friend that is very involved and say, why should I go this way over that way? Call 2 or 3 friends. It's an opportunity to call a friend and talk about something. It's worth doing. If your friends are trustworthy, find a friend that has the same values as you and lives the same way you live, and say, why do you think this? It's just not that hard.
You can ask a parent even if you trust them. And the number one reason,
it's funny how parents get smarter as you get older.
Yeah, they do. Yes, sir. And you know, number one reason that people give money, donate their time, volunteer for charitable causes, right, in this country, someone asked me, right? So it's, if you are a voter and you have some friends who are on the fence about voting, tell them to vote and tell them why.
Absolutely.
And even if, I mean, probably you want to encourage them to vote for your candidates, but tell them why.
Right. Well, that's a good point. Early voting is different from voting on the day of. Some people like going to the poll on the day, and they just like, oh, I just like that joy of that. If you're like one of those, that's more power to you, man. But the good thing about early voting is you can go to any one of the early voting facilities, 20 some odd in the county, and you can go to any of them. And so you can take your coworker who may live across the city from you, but you can go to the same polling site and vote together. So take a friend to go vote, and do it during early voting, which is, I think, going on now and through in the next week. So, Dr. Ferguson, thank you for joining us. We wish you all the best in your illustrious career. We hope you become tenured and become the president of TCU someday. And so I wish you the best of luck. And thank you for joining us on White Hat Law.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we want to thank you for listening to the White Hat Law Show here with Warren Nord. To find out more about Warren, check him out at nordlaw.com. See you next time.